August 1945. The Pacific Ocean. Coordinates classified. The final act of the Second World War was a period of unyielding desperation for the Imperial Japanese military. They had already endured the strategic devastation at Midway, witnessed the relentless loss of their crucial surface fleet, and faced the overwhelming tide of the American industrial war machine, which was generating technological and naval superiority on an unprecedented scale. By 1945, the ability to challenge the United States in conventional naval warfare was gone. Yet, in a hidden, heavily guarded corner of the Kure naval base, Japan was assembling a final, audacious weapon, a machine so vast and strategically complex that it defied all established military doctrine and naval logic. This weapon was the I-400. Its very classification shattered all naval norms. It was not a destroyer, nor a cruiser, nor even a standard attack submarine designed for sinking merchant ships. It was designated a Sen Toku, or special submarine, an engineering marvel of immense proportions. Measuring a colossal 122 meters, 400 feet, from bow to stern, the I-400 earned the immediate, stunned recognition of being the largest submarine built by any nation, by a significant margin, until the dawn of the nuclear age decades later. It displaced an astonishing 6,560 tons when fully submerged, a figure comparable to a light cruiser and nearly 4 times the displacement of the American Gato-class submarines that dominated the Pacific. The I-400's radical purpose was evident in its structure, a massive, 115-foot-long, cylindrical, watertight aircraft hangar seamlessly integrated into the deck just forward of the enormous conning tower. This hangar was capable of concealing, protecting, and launching a formidable strike force of 3 specialized, folding-wing attack bombers, the HEM-6A Seiran, Mountain Mist. Each aircraft was designed to carry a critical payload of high explosives or an armor-piercing torpedo. The mission of the I-400 was not local defense, it was global offense. With an operational cruising range of over 37,500 nautical miles, the vessel had the unprecedented capacity to circumnavigate the Earth 1.5 times without a single resupply stop. It was the ultimate, submersible strike platform, built to bypass the U.S. Navy's extensive perimeter and deliver a devastating air attack anywhere on the globe. The strategic target chosen for its first mission was the Panama Canal. This singular, vital choke point, the engineering masterpiece linking the Atlantic and Pacific, was the indispensable artery for the U.S. Navy and the supply lines supporting the entire Pacific campaign. A successful strike, targeting the colossal locks and control dams, threatened to paralyze U.S. naval mobility and instantly cripple the Allied war effort, potentially extending the conflict for years. The I-400 was a final, desperate gambit, a weapon of asymmetric terror conceived by a collapsing empire. This is the exhaustive story of the largest conventional submarine ever conceived, the extraordinary engineering feat hidden in plain sight, and the ultimate, high-stakes weapon that was built to change the world but, thankfully, was deployed too late to unleash its devastating potential. The visionary impetus behind the I-400 project lay with Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant, yet tragic, Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet. Having masterminded the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto possessed a profound, if ultimately accurate, understanding of the overwhelming industrial capacity of the United States. Following the catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Midway in mid-1942, where Japan lost 4 vital fleet carriers, Yamamoto recognized with brutal clarity that the Imperial Navy could no longer hope to challenge the United States in conventional carrier warfare. His thinking shifted from frontal assault to asymmetrical, demoralizing offense. He posited a radical solution, a massive, self-sufficient submarine fleet that could strike directly at America's homeland or its critical supply infrastructure, bypassing the expanding U.S. naval perimeter entirely. In January 1942, before his death, Yamamoto gave the initial directive to the Kure Naval Yard's Technical Design Office: design a submarine that must possess a truly global reach. The requirement was explicit: the vessel must be capable of sailing a distance of at least 40,000 nautical miles without requiring resupply, and it must carry a minimum of 2, preferably 3, attack aircraft. This order was a strategic blank check, demanding that the engineers completely disregard all existing conventional naval constraints. The resulting design was astounding, exceeding even Yamamoto's initial scale. The I-400 class measured an imposing 122 meters, 400 feet, in length and displaced an immense 6,560 tons when fully submerged. This put the submarine in the size category of a contemporary light cruiser, dwarfing even the largest U-boats used by the German Kriegsmarine. The core engineering challenge was not merely size, but the seamless, functional integration of an air wing onto a submersible hull. The design team solved this with the installation of a massive, 42-foot, 12.8-meter diameter cylindrical, watertight hangar, strategically positioned just forward of the enormous conning tower. This immense structure was angled slightly off-center to the port side, allowing the large, retractable catapult system to be mounted cleanly on the forward deck. To fit inside this cramped, highly specialized space, the dedicated aircraft, the HEM-6A Seiran, Mountain Mist, had to be designed from scratch with truly remarkable, space-saving features. Its main wings folded back hydraulically 90 degrees along the fuselage, the horizontal stabilizers folded down, and its large amphibious floats were detachable, stored in a separate compartment beneath the flight deck. The planes were kept fueled, armed, and perpetually ready within the hangar, drastically minimizing preparation time. The necessity for rapid deployment dictated the entire operational design. The highly trained crew, totaling 144 men, including 3 specialized aircraft maintenance technicians per plane, had an incredibly tight window upon surfacing. The entire operation, from opening the heavy hangar door to catapulting the third aircraft into the air, was meticulously practiced and designed to be completed in less than 7 minutes. This breakneck speed was an absolute necessity, as every second the colossal submarine remained on the surface exponentially increased the risk of detection by Allied air patrols or surface destroyers. To fulfill the demand for global reach and endurance, the I-400 was equipped with 4 massive 2,250 horsepower diesel engines, far exceeding the power of any contemporary submarine. These engines delivered the near-mythical surface range necessary for trans-Pacific and potentially transatlantic operations. Critically, the vessel was one of the first Japanese warships to feature an integrated snorkel system, drawing fresh air through a massive retractable mast. This allowed the submarine to run its diesel engines and recharge its extensive battery banks while remaining safely submerged at periscope depth, drastically extending its submerged endurance and making it significantly harder to detect by traditional anti-submarine warfare (ASW) methods. The construction of these submarines was a monumental drain on the Japanese war economy, consuming massive amounts of steel and skilled manpower. Due to their unprecedented size, they could only be built in a few, highly specialized naval shipyards. Japan ultimately managed to complete only 3 I-400 class vessels, I-400, I-401, and I-402, before the war's end, falling drastically short of the planned fleet of 18. The entire construction program was deemed a top-secret national priority, viewed by the desperate Japanese command as the strategic technological deterrent that could still provide an equalizer against the relentless Allied advance. The technological mastery required to execute the I-400 concept lay fundamentally in the design of its pressure hull and propulsion systems, the core components that allowed it to function as a truly submersible aircraft carrier. The hull was the most immediate challenge. Constructed from high-tensile steel, it had to be robust enough to withstand the immense pressures of deep ocean diving while simultaneously being the largest hull ever produced in a Japanese shipyard. The vessel's operational diving depth was officially around 100 meters, 330 feet, though its immense size meant that stress factors at that depth were extreme and required continuous, meticulous monitoring by the crew. The exterior of the I-400 employed early forms of stealth technology. The hull surfaces were meticulously finished and, significantly, may have been clad with early acoustic damping rubber tiling, a rudimentary precursor to the advanced anechoic tiles later used extensively on Cold War submarines. The goal was twofold: to absorb the active sonar pings of Allied patrols and to dampen the considerable internal noise generated by the powerful machinery, thereby making the colossal vessel much harder to detect by passive acoustic means. The pressurized cylindrical hangar was the most defining, yet most vulnerable, feature. Constructed from thick, reinforced steel, it was designed to protect the delicate aircraft and their optical instruments from the immense water pressure at depth. The hangar door, a massive, hinged, and heavily gasketed piece of steel, was manually opened using a powerful geared mechanism and had to be capable of instant, watertight closure upon the command for an emergency crash dive. The crew performed constant checks on these gaskets, understanding that any failure in the hangar seal meant catastrophic flooding and instant loss of buoyancy. The immense size of the I-400 offered unique advantages and severe disadvantages. On the positive side, the scale allowed for an unprecedented internal storage capacity, providing space for over 1,700 tons of fuel, diesel and aviation, along with enough provisions and fresh water for its crew of 144 men for up to 4 months, making it strategically independent of all shore bases. However, its massive displacement also meant it was inherently slower and less maneuverable underwater than smaller attack submarines, making its reliance on stealth and long-range operation paramount. Its propulsion system was designed for efficiency and silence, not speed. The 4 powerful 2,250 horsepower diesel engines provided the surface power for its global range, while a large bank of batteries provided submerged power. Crucially, the vessel featured a highly effective integrated snorkel system, housed within a massive retractable mast. This allowed the submarine to run its diesel engines and recharge its battery banks continuously while submerged at periscope depth, a major technological leap that effectively eliminated the need for risky nighttime surfacing, the period when U-boats were most vulnerable to Allied radar. Finally, the armament of the I-400 underscored its hybrid mission. It carried a conventional load of 8 forward 533 mm torpedo tubes for self-defense and attack. Yet, the deck armament was exceptional for a submarine, designed to fend off surface attackers during the vulnerable aircraft launch sequence. This included a massive 140 mm, 5.5-inch, deck gun positioned aft of the conning tower, and numerous 25 mm triple-mount anti-aircraft cannons spread across the deck structure, giving the vessel the defensive punch of a small surface combatant. This combination of stealth, immense size, and integrated defensive capability made the I-400 a completely new class of military machine, years ahead of its time. The I-400 was only half of the weapon system. The other half was the specialized aircraft it carried, the HEM-6A Seiran, Mountain Mist. This plane represents an extreme outlier in aviation history, as its fundamental design requirements were dictated not by traditional aerodynamics or combat performance, but solely by the cramped, cylindrical confines of the massive submarine's hangar. The Seiran was a true engineering marvel born directly out of the necessity of spatial constraint. To fit within the 42-foot, 12.8-meter diameter hangar structure, HE engineers developed a series of ingenious, patented transformation mechanisms that allowed the attack plane to be rapidly deployed and stowed. Folding wings. The main wings did not merely detach. They were designed with a complex locking mechanism and hinged to fold back 90 degrees along the fuselage using a powerful hydraulic system. This minimized the plane's lateral footprint within the confined storage space. Folding empennage. The horizontal stabilizers of the tail assembly were designed to fold downwards, further compacting the aircraft's overall silhouette. Detachable floats. The Seiran was technically an amphibious plane, capable of using large floats for water landings. However, for the high-priority, long-range attack missions, such as the Panama Canal operation, the floats were intentionally omitted. This modification significantly increased the plane's speed and bomb load by reducing drag. This decision simultaneously designated the missions as effectively one-way operations, with the pilots forced to ditch the aircraft upon completion or attempt a highly dangerous water landing for a slim chance of recovery. The Seiran was intended as a formidable bomber torpedo plane, optimized for precise, high-impact strikes. It was powered by the robust, liquid-cooled 12-cylinder HE at 32 engine, a licensed derivative of the German Daimler-Benz DB601, which provided enough power for a top speed of approximately 475 km per hour, 295 miles per hour. Its operational payload consisted of either a single, heavy 850 kg high-explosive bomb or a 450 mm aerial torpedo, sufficient destructive power to inflict critical damage on a major vessel or, more critically, the massive concrete structures of the Panama Canal locks. The launch readiness procedure was the most critical and hazardous element, transforming the submarine crew into a highly specialized, fast-acting racing team. The three aircraft were stored in the hermetically sealed, gas-filled hangar. The inert gas was used as an anti-fire measure, kept fully fueled and armed at all times. The intended 7-minute launch cycle was a tightly choreographed sequence of precision actions. Surfacing and door opening. The submarine would surface to a level allowing the heavy hangar doors to be rapidly opened using powerful cranks and gears. Deployment. The Seiran was rolled out of the hangar onto the foredeck's rail system. Wing assembly. Mechanics, working under immense pressure and often in heavy seas, would manually and hydraulically lock the wings and tail assembly into their rigid, flight-ready positions. Catapult launch. The plane was swiftly secured onto the pneumatic catapult track. This sophisticated system, utilizing compressed air, was designed to accelerate the 4.5-ton aircraft to takeoff speed over a distance of only 26 meters, 85 feet, effectively flinging it into the air to minimize the submarine's surface exposure time. The pilots were rigorously trained for high-altitude, long-distance navigation and low-level precision attacks. The M6A Seiran's effectiveness lay not in prolonged combat capability. It lacked heavy defensive armor and armament, but in its utter surprise factor. Its mission profile was to strike where it was least expected, deep in the inner waters of the United States or the Atlantic, delivering a decisive blow from complete operational obscurity. This unique blend of engineering resilience and calculated risk made the Seiran the perfect instrument for the I-400's radical asymmetrical warfare doctrine. The I-400 was explicitly commissioned and meticulously designed for one singular, high-stakes objective, a devastating strategic strike on the Panama Canal. This man-made waterway, the ultimate masterpiece of early 20th century engineering, represented the critical vulnerability of the U.S. war machine. The canal was the only rapid conduit allowing the U.S. Navy and its vast merchant fleet to quickly move between the Atlantic and Pacific theaters. Japanese strategists correctly assessed that destroying the canal's central infrastructure would effectively paralyze U.S. naval mobility and instantly cripple the Allied war effort, potentially buying Japan the crucial time needed to force a negotiated peace. The most vulnerable point was determined to be the Gaetan locks and the Miraflores locks. These colossal concrete structures and their adjacent pumping stations regulate the flow of water and elevate ships. Japanese intelligence indicated that a well-placed, heavy bomb strike could not only destroy the massive, irreplaceable steel lock gates but also critically damage the mechanisms and infrastructure. The expected result was the immediate flooding of the lock chambers, followed by a channel blocked by debris, rendering the entire canal unusable for an estimated 6 months to over a year. The plan to achieve this catastrophic destruction was codenamed Operation PX. The core of the mission was a terrifying blend of long-range stealth and high-risk audacity. Silent infiltration. The I-400 and its sister ship, the I-401, would sail from Japan, cross the vast Pacific Ocean entirely submerged or using their snorkel for weeks, and rendezvous in the remote Gulf of Panama, far from established Allied patrol routes. Synchronized strike. The 6 Seiran bombers would be launched before dawn, under the cloak of darkness, to maximize the element of surprise. The planes were laden with specialized, heavy ordnance, armor-piercing torpedoes or high-explosive bombs, specifically chosen to penetrate the thick concrete and steel of the lock infrastructure. Destruction protocol. The Seiran pilots were rigorously trained for this highly precise, low-level attack. They practiced their runs against a full-scale mock-up of the canal locks constructed on an isolated Japanese lake. Their primary target was the Gaetan locks, aiming to render the entire system inoperable with a single, synchronized blow. The operational parameters for the pilots were a stark reflection of the desperation of the era. The mission initially demanded that the pilots perform a suicide attack after dropping their ordnance, intentionally crashing their planes into the locks to guarantee maximum structural damage. This was later amended to allow pilots the low-probability option of ditching their planes nearby for a possible recovery by the waiting submarines. The decision to carry out the attack was ultimately entrusted to Captain Arisuke Arizumi, the veteran commander of the Special Submarine Flotilla. While the Japanese focused with absolute secrecy on the canal, the Allies were not entirely blind. American intelligence knew that Japan was developing an unusually large, long-range submarine, though the exact aircraft carrying capability was never confirmed. Recognizing the canal's critical strategic importance, the U.S. military maintained heavy fortification, including extensive coastal artillery defenses, continuous radar surveillance, and a dedicated anti-submarine presence in the Caribbean and Pacific approaches. The psychological warfare element was not limited to the attack itself. The sheer logistical nightmare of the I-400 system led Japanese High Command to consider a horrifying contingency: Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night, Sakura ha Iyu Yoru. This was a plan to use the I-400 to deliver plague-carrying insects via Seiran bombers to the American mainland. This potential biological attack was studied but thankfully never authorized for execution. However, the existence of such a plan reveals the utter extremism and calculated terror underpinning the I-400's strategic doctrine. The I-400 and I-401 were preparing to sail for the Panama Canal in June 1945, but the disastrous military situation forced a sudden strategic pivot. The overwhelming loss of Okinawa dictated that the majority of the U.S. fleet was now dangerously concentrated at the Ulithi Atoll in the Western Pacific. The mission was swiftly changed. Instead of the canal, the I-400 was ordered to inflict massive damage on the gathered American fleet in the Ulithi anchorage. The submarines were already underway for this new target when the war abruptly ended. As the summer of 1945 wore on, the war situation for Japan deteriorated far faster than even the most pessimistic strategists had foreseen. The relentless American advance and the devastating casualties suffered during the Battle of Okinawa forced the Japanese High Command to make a sudden, crucial pivot, effectively canceling the long-planned Panama Canal attack, Operation PX. The immediate threat was no longer the American logistical rear, but the overwhelming presence of the U.S. Navy poised for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. The new target was the Ulithi Atoll in the Western Pacific, one of the most critical and largest forward staging bases ever established by the U.S. Navy. Ulithi was not merely an anchorage, it was a floating city, a vast, protected lagoon deep inside the Pacific that served as the primary refueling, maintenance, and resupply hub for the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet. At any given time, hundreds of warships, including up to 20 fleet aircraft carriers and numerous battleships, cruisers, and auxiliaries, were moored there. The concentration of U.S. naval power in one place represented an irresistible and vulnerable target. The new mission, codenamed Operation Arashi, Operation Mountain Storm, was entrusted to the Sixth Fleet, led by the special attack unit known as Taemin, a reference to a powerful Buddhist deity. This unit consisted of the two operational supersubmarines, I-400 and I-401, along with four smaller, conventional submarines, I-13 and I-14, which would also carry aircraft, and I-47 and I-58, providing torpedo support. The objective was to launch a devastating, synchronized air attack on the concentrated fleet at Ulithi, inflicting maximum damage and potentially delaying the planned Allied invasion, Operation Downfall. The deployment preparations were carried out under immense pressure. The Seiran pilots were immediately retrained for a shallow-water, mass-target attack as opposed to the precision lockgate strike. Their new focus was on area damage and sinking carriers. To enhance the surprise factor, a bizarre and desperate deception was prepared. Pilot deception: the Seiran aircraft were to be painted with American star insignia, white star on a blue circle. Target confusion: The plan was for the Japanese planes to fly to the anchorage, initially confusing American radar operators and anti-aircraft crews long enough to commence their bombing runs before being identified as enemy aircraft. The launch sequence was practiced relentlessly, aiming for absolute efficiency. The submarines were to arrive at Ulithi, surface, and launch all 6 Seiran bombers, 3 from the I-400 and 3 from the I-401, in rapid succession. The air attack was scheduled for August 17, 1945, with the bombers ordered to strike the most valuable targets, particularly the aircraft carriers, before ditching their aircraft in the ocean and rendezvousing with the submarines. The I-400 and I-401 were fully fueled, armed, and underway, making their final deep-water transit to the rendezvous point near Ulithi. The crews were mentally prepared for what they knew was essentially a final, suicidal grand gesture. However, just 2 days before the scheduled attack, while the submarines were still in deep transit, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15, 1945. The mission was aborted. The command to abort and return to Kyoto also included explicit, final instructions: destroy all sensitive equipment, dispose of all aircraft, and ensure no technological secrets fell into Allied hands. The crew of the I-400, in a devastating moment of final duty, jettisoned their Seiran bombers, their torpedoes, and all classified operational documents into the ocean, sinking the physical evidence of their audacious, final mission forever. The submarine that was built to execute a global strike never fired a shot in anger. Following the abrupt cessation of hostilities in mid-August 1945, the colossal I-400 and its sister ship, the I-401, were still in deep transit. They received the order to abort the Ulithi mission and return to the Kyoto naval base. On August 29, 1945, the I-400 was intercepted by the U.S. Navy submarine sea post near the Key Channel, marking one of the most astonishing intelligence acquisitions of the entire war. American naval personnel who first boarded the vessel were reportedly stunned into disbelief by its sheer size, initially mistaking the 400-foot Behemoth for a Japanese destroyer or even a small cruiser. They swiftly seized the I-400, I-401, and I-402, along with 2 high-speed I-201 class submarines, as invaluable prizes of war. The intelligence value of the I-400 was immense. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz ordered an immediate and highly classified technical evaluation. American technicians were deeply impressed, concluding that the I-400 was superior to anything in the U.S. fleet in several key aspects, most notably its incredible 37,500-mile operational range, its double-hull survivability, and its sophisticated snorkel technology, a feature the U.S. Navy was only beginning to fully integrate. The discovery of a fully operational, submersible aircraft carrier system immediately forced a major and urgent re-evaluation of U.S. naval strategic doctrine and anti-submarine warfare (ASW) methods. However, the final fate of the I-400 was sealed not by the past war, but by the dawning Cold War. The United States was intensely concerned that the Soviet Union would invoke the agreements between the Allied powers to demand joint technical access and inspection of the captured Japanese military technology. The thought of this advanced, globe-spanning submarine technology falling into Soviet hands was deemed a catastrophic strategic risk. Faced with this ethical and geopolitical dilemma, the U.S. Navy made a clandestine and unilateral decision. In the spring of 1946, the captured I-400, I-401, and I-402 were towed far off the coast of the Hawaiian Islands, away from international waters and media scrutiny. There, in a highly secretive operation, they were deliberately sunk with torpedoes by the submarine USS Cabazon. This controversial act was performed to deny the Soviet Union access to the advanced Japanese design, effectively burying the evidence of Japan's most audacious and revolutionary war project deep beneath the Pacific waves. For nearly 6 decades, the precise wreck sites of these enormous vessels remained officially unknown and classified. It wasn't until the early 21st century that the Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory, HURL, in collaboration with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, began the difficult task of searching the deep ocean floor. In 2005, Hull successfully located the wreck of the I-401, and later the I-400 itself, resting at a depth of over 700 meters. The discovery provided the final, chilling confirmation of their immense, pioneering scale and technological sophistication, validating the historical narrative of a weapon that was conceived to change the balance of power, built through desperation, and ultimately sunk in secrecy, a massive, silent testament to the extreme lengths of ingenuity reached during the final, desperate days of the Second World War.